We offer a variety of different alternatives, whether it be working with one of the nonprofit organizations to approach MSHDA for assistance, or just simply receiving an extension on the foreclosure from my office, which I have the authority to do. But specifically the properties we are working to save from foreclosure, we try all properties, but the ones we work extra special on are the single residential homes and businesses in which that person is relying on a sole source of income from that business.
Okay, and we're talking about properties throughout the county. It's not concentrated in Delta or in the more rural areas. These properties that you end up helping the families with, is that pretty evenly distributed?
It's amazingly evenly distributed. There seems to be no one particular township, city, or village that is more than others. It's distributed quite evenly throughout the county.
Thank you.
Mr. Robinson, could you comment quickly on the library penal fines? Is that fund, is that number increasing, decreasing? I see that this year is about $330,000. These are all dollars that are come out of tickets that are written, and the monies are distributed to all the libraries in the county. Is that number going up or down?
That went down last year. And unfortunately, I have a hard time getting librarians to understand that I'm not in charge of determining what that number is, so I hear from a lot of them. But there seems to be no rhyme or reason to the number of state penal fines that are issued within the county from year to year. I can't explain it. I don't understand that road level process, but it does seem to go up and down. In general, it has gone up.
Okay, because that's determined by which ordinance the ticket is written under by the officer on duty at that time. So,
correct.
I was just curious if we had some sort of a trend in that area.
The general trend is up, although it was down last year.
Okay,
that's state. They are state penal fines, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I distribute those funds by population percentage based on the numbers that I get from the state library.
Okay. Commissioner Augustine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Bob, just real quick, the dark stores issue that we've been dealing with here at the county and the rest of the state, is there any movement on that at the state level? Do you know? Has anything changed?
I'm aware of nothing that has changed, and with respect to dark stores, there just doesn't seem to be the will in Lansing. Even though I might add that the recent statistic there was that you could build a garage in your backyard tomorrow on private property. Assessment what the large box stores are paying, many large box stores throughout the county.
It's because I don't have a lobbyist at the state legislature to change their mind, unfortunately.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you.
Thanks for the good work. Saving us money. Now it's time to open a public hearing for the Michigan Department of Natural Resources Land and Water Grant application. I will open this hearing for public comment, and I would like to start with Troy Stoll, our Parks Director.
The information that on the project that's being considered is not included in your packet. You will receive a print copy of that. For the audience.
Yeah, it was a separate piece in the board packet also. Got it? Okay, tell us about it, Troy.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. There's some new commissioners that I have not had an opportunity to meet yet. My name is Troy Stowell. The 8 days into my job here as the new Eaton County Parks Director. So it's my privilege to come before you as part of this public hearing as we apply for a grant through the DNR. It's a Land and Water Conservation Grant. A little bit of history regarding the grant that we are seeking for development purposes at Crandall Park. The DNR offers 3 different types of grants through their granting process. The first one and most popular one is the Natural Trust Fund grant. The second one, which is a Land and Water Conservation grant, which is what we are asking for tonight. And then the third one is the Recreation Passport Grant. A little bit about the grants. The DNR Trust Fund grant is a grant that offers a 25% local match. However, with that, the scoring mechanism that the DNR uses to actually fund and award the grants is a little bit more complicated and a little bit more convoluted and a lot more competitive. Whereas the Land and Water Conservation Grant that we are asking for tonight has a higher matching level, but the scoring itself is a little bit easier for us to attain. So we've been working with a local consultant on developing the scope of the grant, and we've had a few different drafts that we've had taken care of. Originally looking at a larger scope, attacking the DNR Trust Fund grant itself. However, after a pre-scoring, we were not at a level with that grant with a 25% match that we felt confident we would get awarded by the state. We were actually about 100 points below the minimum threshold for 2017 fiscal year award grants. So at the recommendation of the consultant as well as our DNR grant coordinator, we reviewed the scope of the grant based on the amount of match dollars that we had, attacking the Land and Water Conservation Grant, which had the 50% match, which then meant that the scope of the grant itself had to be minimized. So what you have before you, as well as up on the screen, is the scope of the grant that we would like to apply for. And it is our belief and our understanding that if we go through with this is going to score well enough for us to get the grant. And these are priority projects that we feel are attainable within the grant scope and guidelines. It's also something that we feel would have an immediate impact to the residents out there. So looking at that, primarily, one of the biggest things that we heard through the public meetings, as well as through our park commission, is the construction of a walking path. We feel that incorporating about 1.25 miles of walking trails out there at the lake is attainable. This is not enough to do the entire circumference of the lake itself, but gets us a little bit more than a third of the way done. It would be our intention, after the 1.25 miles is completed, to then do natural trail systems in there as well, and then in future grant cycles or future fundraising efforts, eventually work on completing that. We would look at installing fishing platforms and an ADA accessible canoe and kayak launch, improvements on signage and wayfinding. Then there would be issues with material testing, survey, design costs, and fees. And then we would also have to apply for a DEQ permit, which is included in there. So you can see the preliminary cost is just over $214,000, with the funding of the county match of $10,000, an in-kind contribution from the Crandall family of $100,000, bringing the entire grant funding to $104,000 for the scope of $214,500. So, like I said, it is our hope to get the resolution taken care of and passed tonight. Welcome any public comments on the scope of the project, any comments from the Board of Commissioners on the scope of the project, and move forward. We would have a April 1st deadline for the grant application itself, and we would then have an opportunity after that initial deadline to review our grant after we get our initial scoring and make amendments at that time. We would hear from the state in late fall whether or not the project was awarded, and then funding at the state level would be approved by the House and Senate, typically in the end of November, beginning of December. So, any questions?
Under funding, you have grant funding of $104,500. What is that from?
The $104,500 is what our match would be. So we're required to put up 50% of the grant award. So it would be $104,500, $100,000 of it. We're able to count within the scope of the grant in-kind contributions, and that's coming from the Crandall family with the development of the walking path itself, and then the county match of $10,000 to get us over that 50% threshold.
I don't get it. The $104,500.
Yep.
$104,000 is the grant that will be pursued through the DNR land and water.
Oh, so this is the total budget, not the total.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Barnes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The $10,000, I assume, is coming out of the lease monies we generate.
The $10,000 is already appropriated within the Parks Fund. It is not.
So it's not in addition to the existing Parks Fund. Thank you.
Commissioner Augustine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Troy, I know that we've been through a couple of different versions of this, so I
Yes.
appreciate you hitting the ground running with putting together what you think, I assume, is the best possible application. Just a question on the 35 grand for materials testing, survey design. That seems to be, I mean, that's almost 20% of the project cost. Is that something that we're going to be able to use down the road as further development comes into play, or is that specifically for this trail for this project?
I think it's both. We also have to include in the budget contingency funds as well. The DNR requires that as a scope within the grant, just in case of overages, and that is also included in there as well.
Okay. And then some of that money, I would assume, would go to the consultant that we're using. What's the name of the company?
Spicer Group?
Spicer Group, yeah, thank you.
If they are retained and get the RFP for the actual projects, yes, they are developing the scope of the grant as well as the master plan for the grant, but they would not be the sole company that we would use for the actual design and development of the project.
Okay, so they're involved at this level, but they're not guaranteed to be the...
Correct, yes, we would send out an RFP for that.
Perfect, okay, thank you very much.
Commissioner Spence?
Yes, Troy, good to meet you.
Yes.
I think this is the first time I've met you, and I've heard good things about you and your background, so welcome.
Thank you.
But I did have a question, and I'm supportive of anything that would improve Crandall Lake property, and including this project, and I'm optimistic that you would get your grant. But the question I have was, when we completed the Crandall Lake project process a year and a half ago, whenever, we committed and promised to our constituents and others that in the initial years the development costs would not impact adversely on our general fund or on any other programs. Can you cause us to be confident that we're keeping that commitment in terms of what we've expended to date? And assuming this project goes through, would we continue to be keeping that commitment that this is not something that is taking money from other areas of our budget?
Yes, I think historically I can't speak to it fairly well at this point yet. I think moving forward we would have much more opportunity to fundraise, seek out other support from community members, service groups, things like that, moving forward that can then go into our match. To the public, I would say we're getting a $200,000 project basically for $10,000. So I think we're still being good stewards of the public money, maybe not entirely free, but I think that to the individuals that I've spoken with already, they want to see some development out there, and I think this is going to be a good first opportunity for us to do that.
And in the past year since the acquisition, we've expended minor trivial costs which were in part offset by the leasing of the land for fencing and so forth. A general idea, has that been more than $10,000?
I can't answer that confidently, no, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Troy? Barbara? Commissioner Rogers?
Thank you, Commissioner Muller. When I saw some numbers for the grant application, the beach was on there was road numbers on there, there's a handicapped access to the beach. This is, I guess there's been some changes made. Can we explain why those changes were made?
Yep, we had a conversation with the DNR grant coordinator as well to make some last minute changes on that. When we spoke at the public planning meeting, it was more about infrastructure and amenities such as the beach. One of the things internally that we wanted to do, as well as our meeting with the consultant on Monday out there, was to take a step back a little bit on things such as the beach in a way that we could then internally study lake levels and make sure that when we do eventually put a beach out there, that it's in the correct location, and it's in the correct distance from the beach. One of the things that we don't want to do is to put a $40,000 beach out there and have it be 100 feet from the water's edge because the lake is dropping. So we want to just take a little bit of a breather on that and do that. By removing the beach aspect from the grant itself and just having the road improvements and the parking lot improvements on there, we would not be able to score well enough on the grant to get it, which is why the walking trail was put back in. So just taking a little bit of a breather so we can take about a year to study the lake levels internally as much as possible to determine where those good locations are going to be. So and I think that best summarizes that decision process.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Prowright.
Since you're here, hi, I'm not on Public Works and Planning, so I have to ask it here. Troy, nice to meet you. But are you going to be posting signs that say no swimming and things like that if you don't have a proper beach that can be roped off and expect families to be there safely in the water?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. We would have no swimming, no lifeguard on duty signs. And that was one of the concerns initially with having a beach out there as well. With the initial scope that we had was the increased cost that the county would accrue from trying to staff that as much as possible. So we would take up proper steps to try to minimize the public impact and actually going in there and swimming and things like that through signage. So.
We don't have staff at any of our other swimming county parks.
Correct. Correct. We would be looking at a gatehouse and motor vehicle entry fees and the increased cost there to try to control and police the public that are coming in and using it.
Okay. I'm just worried about safety of people on a hot day thinking it's water.
Right. Understandable.
What is it?
Well, you know what I'm saying, if we don't have it properly set up for that.
Correct.
But yeah, we're going to have people in there with kayaks and platforms and things like that. That's why I'm asking.
Yep. Yeah, I will definitely make a note of that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, this is an opportunity for the public. If anyone would like to speak just to this issue, to the grant from the DNR, this is an opportunity to address us and speak toward this particular grant.
Is there going to be public bathrooms out there?
Yes, please.
Just a question. I didn't hear anything about public bathrooms or like washing or drinking fountains or something like that, because people are going to be out there hiking with their dogs or camping for long periods of time. Would that?
It would be, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just for purposes of requirements, when people speak from the public, they really need to identify themselves?
Correct.
Okay.
We'll catch her next time. She'll
Okay.
speak soon. Okay, anyone else? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. I would ask you to give your name and address, and I'm going to limit speaking to 3 minutes. Some of the letters we had were said that we were not being fair on the time. I've got my timer up here, and I will motion when 3 minutes is up. Please, for the sake of brevity, 3 minutes, make your point, and we'll have a lot of speakers, I imagine. So start with name and address.
I'm going to surprise you because they're not all here for my issue. Robert Seppeter, 7290 Island Highway. As of Monday the 19th, Canal Road has been closed at Columbia for 30 days. Canal was closed for over 2 weeks between Wilbur and Rossman. Flooding is where the road has sunk several feet. 4 years ago, I went to the Road and Drain Commissions. They did nothing but point at each other. I came to this board February of 2014. Nothing has happened since. So I again raised this issue at this board meeting last month. Commissioner Eaton stated that when the board hires directors for the different departments, they are autonomous and that you don't have oversight. Tonight I want to register my opposition to that type of system. You, the commissioners, volunteered for office and you solicited our votes. We elect you to operate our county for our benefit. This board appoints staff to the department, but you don't oversee them? Who is accountable to the people? At the last meeting, another commissioner stated her support for the road commission. She referenced repaving of the roads in her subdivision, a cosmetic upgrade. Yet we still have main roads in this county that are impassable several times a year. The road commissioner has ignored these annual road floodings for many decades. So where should we, the people, go to get action? You were elected. The Board of Commissioners have hired the road commission staff. I see you as needing to get involved. A frustration is if the water goes over a road in our area on Friday and it recedes Friday afternoon, that road's still closed on Monday. It's an inconsiderate position taken by the road commission, don't you think? Do they have anyone cleaning up on the weekends? Another frustration, Columbia Canal was closed for 30 days, but the only sign showing it closed was from the west, was at the water. It was a 2-mile drive down and back. Why weren't there signs at Gunnell? This lack of consideration for taxpayers and their residents builds more frustration. My understanding is that it took many residents pushing together to get the 5-point highway improved because of the same type of issue. Why don't our elected officials get these things done? You said you'd help us in your campaigning. So I'm asking this board to get involved with the funding process for the road commission. I see that you have a fiduciary responsibility to oversee them for the residents' sake. I'm asking you to somehow prioritize the road commission dollars spent. First on correcting these neglected, annually impassable roads in these flood-prone areas. Where there is no drainage, as at Canal and Columbia, raise the road. After the roads with multiple annual closures are then made always passable, then do your cosmetics. The fact is the road commission has ignored these problem locations for years and years. Since this board hired those people, doesn't it fall on you to motivate them to get it done? And I would ask that more of the comments tonight get recorded in the minutes, not just a note that I was here, because this is a huge problem for the residents, and it's not getting addressed by the road commission. We need leadership from you guys. I still think they work for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Debbie McCula. I'm the Executive Director of the Arts Council of Greater Lansing. Address is 1208 Turner in Lansing. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Commissioners, for allowing some public comment. March is Arts Advocacy Month in the Tri-Counties, and I'm here tonight just to talk a little bit about the value of incorporating arts and culture into Eaton County, from placemaking to economic impact, and I have a couple of things to pass out to you. I just want to let you know this region is rich in arts and cultural organizations and individual artists, and I know each and every one of you has experienced the power of arts in your personal lives. Whether that's experiencing paintings, going to a museum, attending performances, seeing your children participate in after-school music or dance programs. But those of you who are a little unfamiliar with the Arts Council, we've been in existence since 1965 with a mission to support, strengthen, and promote arts, culture, and creativity in Eaton, Ingham, and Clinton counties. We're similar to a Chamber of Commerce, but it's important to note we don't make art, we make art happen. To do this, we work with regional stakeholders, businesses, school districts, and government agencies in an effort to engage public support for the arts. For our members, which is close to about 300 arts organizations and individual artists, we help where help is needed. We promote their work. We provide individualized consultations and trainings. We provide grant funding, over $275,000 each year for arts groups and for individual artists, and we provide other services based upon needs. Your new Parks Director and I have had the pleasure of working together in Eaton Rapids. We're doing a project there. We are going to start working with Grand Ledge, and we've been working very heartily with Charlotte with bringing an arts night out twice this year into the Charlotte community. At the Arts Council, we talk a lot about the value of the arts and culture and we always start with its intrinsic value, what we feel when we are as artists. But what you may not realize is that the arts play a very significant role in driving economic development and building quality of life. The arts provide real jobs, both directly and indirectly, aid in strengthening the tax base. They help us recruit visitors and new businesses, and they allow us to attract and retain talent and inspire community revitalization. Attendees at arts and cultural events spend $24.60 per person per event in our community, beyond the cost of admission, and on items such as meals, parking, babysitters, etc. More than $124 million is spent by audiences of arts and cultural events each year in our tri-counties. And purchases by Greater Lansing arts sector provide the region with $58 million in economic impact and $3.1 million in state tax revenue annually. We make an incredible impact here, and we prove time and time again that the arts are one of the main factors in creating thriving and dynamic communities. The relationship of those findings and that data has been a really strong indicator that arts and culture is a huge factor in making our communities better places to live, work, and play, and we work with our municipal agencies to make sure that you are aware of those indicators. So we recognize the essential programs that need your attention: housing, roads, police, fire, etc. But I think we're all now recognizing that there's an emotional attachment to our communities here in Eaton Rapids, and it's one of the chief drivers, that quality of life, and it's one of the chief drivers of economic growth and why people choose to live and work here. So I thank you for your time. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to talk. We're out and about in 30 different communities at our county offices, at our township offices, and at our city offices, and at our school boards, making a plea this month for you to actually make sure that arts and culture remains a priority here in Eaton County. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I would comment to that effect that LEAP is heavily involved in sculpture and art around the community, and there's I'm actually attending a sculpture opening tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and it's really nice to see that placemaking is happening throughout the entire region. So, thank you.
I'm Joan Rose. I'm a professor at Michigan State University. I live at 831 East Sherwood in Williamston, Michigan. I'm a professor of water. I hold the Homer Nolan Chair in Water Research at Michigan State University. I'm a water pollution microbiologist, and I work in between engineering and public health. I work on water quality and how it affects our human health. I study disease and outbreaks. I study particularly viruses that make people sick, and I study septic tanks. I used to live and work in Florida. I've been up here 15 years. I moved up from Florida, and I studied septic tanks in Florida as well. The type of research I do is tracer studies. You actually put a tracer down the toilet and watch where it goes. I also do virus pathogen monitoring and what we call source tracking. We have these new tools in which we can kind of be a CSI of water, where we open up the DNA in a water sample and we can find out the source of the fecal pollution. In this case, we're able to track human markers. There's not been much research done in Michigan. We just started doing some work in Michigan, but we have found that septic tanks in larger numbers, when they increase in a county or a watershed in particular, not so much political boundaries, but watersheds, you see the increasing human marker. The studies in Wisconsin by my colleague, Mark Bochart, have been much more extensive. They found many viruses in the well waters associated with septic tanks. They've also found diarrhea in young children associated with septic tanks, and the movement of these viruses and these types of contaminants from septic tanks. I appreciate the work that's done at the county level to take care of your waters. And to look at that, I truly believe that monitoring, maintenance, inspection, upgrades, looking at some of the new technology is going to save the waters that we all value in Michigan, the water quality that we value. I've got a number of different scientific papers. I've got a few cards here. I'm going to leave them. If you're interested in emailing me and getting any of the papers that we've done on septic tanks here in Michigan, where we found that they the human marker is associated with increasing septic tanks, or any of the work that's been done in Wisconsin, or the work that we've done in Florida, you're interested in that, please contact me. I appreciate the work that you're doing here. I know you're going to be, it looks like on the agenda, talking about septic tanks today. And good luck with all your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Marlena Bernheisel, 4278 Benton Road, Benton Township. And she's a hard act to follow, but I've had the opportunities to travel to some pretty unique places. One of the luxuries of traveling is just being in unique places. But the best luxury is to be at home where you can have safe drinking water and not see spoilage and sewage laying on top of groundwater while you're trying to find a unique and exotic bird. I don't know a whole lot about everything that the doctor just discussed, but I do know that it's really critical, especially given the Flint water crisis recently, that we do need to mediate this and find a compromise so that landowners realize that it's a right to have their property, but it's a responsibility to make sure that their septics are maintained so that drinking water is safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I am Molly Wilson. I am the daughter of Sally Wilson, a physician who practiced in Charlotte and is still a resident of Charlotte. And I will be reading a letter that she wrote regarding the TOST program. I think you all have a copy. I will be reading the heavily abridged version.
Thank you.
Okay. To the Eaton County Board of Commissioners. As a local physician, I would like to underscore the importance of the time of sale or transfer program as an effective means of identifying groundwater contamination sources that jeopardize our citizens' health. I will provide you with information regarding cryptosporidosis, E. coli infection, and encephalitis, 3 human diseases that can be caused by improperly managed sewer systems and water systems. Cryptosporidosis, a parasite transmitted via the fecal-oral route, is one of the most common causes of infectious diarrhea in humans. It is highly infectious, highly contagious, extremely hardy, and it is difficult to eradicate. Cryptosporidium is highly suited for transmission through contaminated drinking or recreational water. E. coli are bacteria normally found in the digestive tracts of warm-blooded organisms. There are 6 strains that cause disease in humans. People become infected from human or animal feces ingestion, primarily via contaminated food or water. Complications include hemolytic uremic syndrome, HUS, a complicated multi-organ system illness that always requires hospitalization and can result in permanent kidney disease or death. There is no vaccine for E. coli infection, but the disease can be prevented through proper hygiene, food handling, and responsible wastewater management. Lastly, encephalitis is caused by St. Louis and West Nile virus, which cause inflammation of the brain via the bite of an infected mosquito. These mosquitoes prefer to lay their eggs in water polluted with sewage, including human sewage. Some individuals who are infected can require hospitalization and develop a life-threatening illness called encephalitis. There have been outbreaks of West Nile virus every summer in Michigan since 2002. The only way to mitigate risk is by reducing exposure to disease-carrying mosquitoes. The CDC recommends that communities develop mosquito control plans to reduce the risk of encephalitis. This should include eliminating open sewage and polluted water, the mosquito's preferred hatching ground. One of the foremost water quality problems in the nation is contamination of groundwater caused by the overflow from septic tanks, cesspools, and privies. Preventing contaminants from reaching the groundwater is the best way to reduce the health risks associated with poor drinking water quality. In conclusion, the data and maps generated from the TOST program since 2000 have unveiled for us the widespread surface contamination, as well as sources of groundwater contamination by mismanaged sewer systems. We have the evidence before us of a complex rural sewage management and groundwater program that will only get worse if nothing is done to enforce existing ordinances. As county commissioners, you are in a unique position to oversee the direction of policy that could prevent a public health crisis. Sincerely, Sally Wilson, MD. And in the appendices, you'll see a complete list of diseases involving sewage from the Indiana Department of Health and Human Services. And we used Indiana because we couldn't find a comparable list for Michigan. And Appendix B is illustrations of the disease described in the article.
Thank you, Mom. I appreciate that. And some scary pictures, too.
I'm glad you like them.
Casey Swanson. I live in Eaton County. I graduated from Grand Ledge. I've lived in Eaton County for a number of years, but I currently live 8/10 of a mile over the county line. I do work, shop, and recreate here in Eaton County. I just want to make a few brief points about the time of sale or transfer program. First, I attended last month's public comment session here in Eaton County. There were 9 Eaton County residents who spoke against TOST and 15 Eaton County residents who spoke in favor of TOST. Additionally, 48 letters in support of the TOST program were received. So I do have some information here on that, if you'd like it. I've heard that Eaton County residents who are on municipal services are not affected by this regulation, so their voice shouldn't matter as much. To that, I'd say first that water is our shared resource. Contamination does not respect property boundaries. Second, those who are on municipal services do pay for those services. Most of the people who are on on-site well and septic pay for them also, but not all of them. This is a list or a map of sites in Eaton County that had no sewage system at all, sites that were identified through the TOST program. Without the TOST program, these sites wouldn't have been found. There are other regulations that can deal with these sites once they're identified, but no other regulation seeks to identify them. That's why TOST was enacted in the first place. Lastly, I've heard some talk about replacement for the TOST program. I've heard it'll accomplish all of the benefits of TOST without any of the downsides. It'll make everyone happy without costing any money. I would urge you, as commissioners, if there is serious talk about replacing the TOST program, please make it meaningful. Don't just let it be lip service to public health. If you pass anything, the public is going to believe that there's someone looking out for them. And this is going to be the first place that they come to look when something goes wrong. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Casey.
Bruce Barland, Diamonddale, Michigan. At the time of sale, the bank has a tremendous influence on the transfer of that property. The buyer of a piece of property or a home has to go to the bank. The bank insists that their septic system and well be inspected. If the inspector says the well or septic needs work, the work gets done before the loan is made. Or the sale is not it's not sold. So the bank tells the people, the buyer, that it's not going to go through, or the seller, it's not going to go through until you get it inspected and the work gets done. And then, once the work is done, the sale is consummated. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Brett McRae. I live at 403 4th Street in Charlotte. I'm hoping you'll indulge me tonight in a little thought experiment. One of the prior speakers spoke of new technology and techniques that allow them to trace whether or not human or animal waste is in the water system. I'd like you to imagine just for a moment that that technology has taken another step or two further, and they were able to trace the location, the origination of a disease that struck a particular individual. So imagine you're sitting at home watching TV one night, and you hear a knock at the door. And there's a family on your porch, and they tell you that their child has suffered from encephalitis or a serious kidney disease resulting in a lifetime of kidney dialysis treatment, or God forbid that child died. And the reason for that is because of contaminated water from your property. How would that make you feel? What could you say to that family? There's no amount of money that's going to make that child whole again, that's going to bring that child back from the dead. It's a permanent injury, a permanent condition. Now I understand this has been a long battle. The opponents of this program, and I admire them for this, have been very persistent. And I'm sure for the members of the commission, it's been very wearisome. But here's the thing. When your 5-year-old goes up to you and asks if he can play with your chainsaw, you tell him no. And if he comes up to you an hour later and asks if he can play with your chainsaw, you tell him no. And if he comes up to you 10 times a day for a year and asks, Dad, can I play with your chainsaw? You still tell him no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McRae.
My name is Sean McBurdy, and I'm here representing Clean Water Action and our 250,000 members across Michigan. To begin with, Michigan is facing a looming wastewater crisis. The DEQ predicts 5.7 billion gallons of raw sewage flow into our lakes and rivers every year from combined sewer overflows and sanitary sewer overflows. They further predict 9.4 billion gallons of raw sewage annually flow into our waterways from leaking and failing septic systems. Michigan is the only state in this country that does not require inspections of septic systems at the state level. Because of that, several of our counties, as you know, have started inspecting septic systems at the county level. 13 out of our 83 counties do it so far. Barry-Eaton County for the past 10 plus years has had one of the strongest septic inspection requirements in the state. Some of the benefits of it already, this one TOST program has already prevented literally millions of gallons of raw sewage from flowing into lakes and rivers here in Eaton County. The proof is right there in the 10-year report that the health department put together. I urge you, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, when you vote, to consider that, and to consider that you're applying for $200,000 of a grant to build what sounds like it's going to be a really great park. I wonder where you're going to get the money for the beach closure signs when the E. coli problem comes and people aren't able to swim there. This is a very repealing TOST is very short-sighted. It's responding to a political moment and not looking at the facts and the science. I encourage you folks to look at the facts and the science and vote to keep this program tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Time, 8888 South Cochran, Olivet. I appreciate the patience and diligence that you have all had in dealing with this problem. I've been through many hearings and meetings with you, and I appreciate the careful thought and debate that's been given, the research that's been done. I do not appreciate the gentleman tonight who referred to myself and many of the other citizens as 5-year-olds. I resent the people who portray you as being in favor of polluted water. I resent the people who come up with an imaginary worst case scenario instead of looking at what's really happening. Again, thank you for the research you have done and will continue to do.
Helen Schneider, 1915 Glass Drive. I live in Benton Township. I'm married to a retired microbiologist. He worked 33 years for the state of Michigan Bureau of Labs. For more than half that time, he was the manager of the microbiology section. He reminded me that public health began with a cholera epidemic in England in the middle 1800s. Thousands of people died. It started when they closed down a pump on Broad Street in London, and after that, the deaths diminished. He couldn't be here tonight. He has a horrible cough, so I'm speaking to both of us. We are asking you to not repeal the TOST program. I've tried to do some reading on both sides of the issues. I spent a good 20 minutes at least on the phone this week with my commissioner. And I do think there's some merit to an alternative proposal, a grand plan. But my problem with that is it sounds like we're going to repeal and maybe replace, maybe not. And the real word I think that keeps coming back to me is voluntary. Voluntary. There's no enforcement. There's no requirement on the alternative plan. I think public health is a safeguard, and its importance can't be eliminated due to a vocal group saying it's too heavy-handed, government overreach, or regulation. I asked the commissioners not to repeal the program on something that could be a suggestion. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't, as an alternative. I've been told that there's some regulation in the county sanitation part, but again, the enforcement is not there. The enforcement, I think, is missing. So I don't see that as a viable alternative. I don't think voluntary compliance will work at all. And people buying homes in our county deserve more than a roll of the dice when they buy a property here. A prior speaker talked about the banks requiring an inspection when people buy a new home. Not if they do a quitclaim deed. I've done that in another county. If it's a cash transaction, it's not required. It didn't happen in our case. It was a cottage in a different county. Okay, I think it may be time to separate the Barry and Eaton County Health Departments, as if we are this far apart on our points of view. I don't think this is something that it shouldn't be partisan if that's what it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Neil Lacoste, 8853 South Clinton Trail, Eaton Rapids, Michigan. And one thing that I certainly do agree with, a couple things I certainly do agree with, we are all aware that sewage left on the surface of the ground is a very serious contaminant that can cause all kinds of serious health problems. There's just no question about that. I think another thing that's been said that I really agree with is that let's base some of our decisions at least on real fact as they pertain to Eaton County. We don't live in a third world country here in Eaton County. I would say that I was in the real estate business for a number of years. I would guess that it's still true that most of the homes in rural areas that have septic systems are not sold every year. In fact, probably a small portion are sold every year. So a lot of those septic systems that are out there working and providing service, hopefully, or failing, you'd think that some of those results would be available to the Eaton County Health Department, or that they would be available to the Michigan Water Testing Lab, the State of Michigan Water Testing Lab, which does thousands of samples every year in the state of Michigan. You'd think that some research could be done there very easily to see if we have any kind of a problem in Eaton County whatsoever, and if we do, what's the degree of the problem? Eaton County is also surrounded by many other counties, by a number of other counties that have good-sized populations similar to the rural area of Eaton County. Do we fare any better here in Eaton County than they do, and they do not have such a system? I think it would be good to base some of this, at least a part of the decision, on real facts, not as they apply to some place in South America that has no such systems and has serious problems. Let's take a look at the facts as they apply to Eaton County and use some of those kinds of figures to come to a sensible solution. I think in the United States of America, one of the foundational purposes is that we would be sovereign in our property. And I hate to give that away too easily. Police officers and firemen can come on our property when there's an emergency situation that's occurring, and we know that it is occurring. It can be seen. Other than that, it pretty much takes a court order to go on somebody's property. And I guess what I'm saying is, I think there should be some reasonable reason to believe that the homeowner is violating the law on his property before people just come onto it and serve a governmental function on that property.
10 seconds, Neil.
Anyway, I hate to see a bureaucrat making that decision rather than a judge. I think a search warrant ought to be required to come on a person's property. And the mere fact that someone's selling their home is not evidence that there's something wrong with their septic system or well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. At this time, we'll proceed on to our meeting. There will be another public comment portion at the end of the meeting. All right. Health and Human Services, Commissioner Rogers.
Thank you, Commissioner Mueller. They have a meeting of Health and Human Services on Monday, March 5th.
Please use your mic.
The meeting of Health and Human Services on Monday, March 5th. Sarah Lewis, who's the Executive Chief Officer of the Community Mental Health Authority for Clinton, Eaton, and Ingham County, was present to provide the agency with a semi-annual report. Also, Miguel Rodriguez is the new Capital Area Community Service Director, and he was there to introduce himself to the committee. And also his goal is to make the agency services more visible. And Colette from the Barry-Eaton Health Department District was there and to act on, to repeal on the site of the sewer and water supply system regulation known as TOST. And the county commissioners should consider the resolution to approve or concur with this action. And there was a motion that we approve of the resolution, and it passed and was sent on, and so therefore I move that the resolution to approve and concur with the Barry-Eaton District Health Department's decision to repeal the regulations governing on-site sewer and water supply system evaluation and maintenance.
Support. Moved by Commissioner Rogers, supported by Commissioner DeRocha. Questions, comments? Commissioner Brailer.
I've never been accused of being shy. This afternoon when I was driving on one of the errands that I was on, I was listening to the radio and I learned that tomorrow is World Water Day. I thought it was kind of appropriate. given the conversation that we're going to have tonight or not. There are two things that all human beings need. And that so far as I know, no science or any other ability has been found to change that. We all need to breathe clean air. We all need to drink clean water. Several years ago, I read an article that military people think that the next major security concern, world concern, will be the lack of clean, clear water throughout the world. There are some places in this world now. You can say to me that I'm only interested in what's happening in Eaton County, but we do not live in a vacuum. I saw an article the other day that says 30 million people on the western part of this country are now at risk for having available water because the Colorado River has diminished. We know that drought covered California for a significant period of time and has not, although it has eased in the last few months, is not done. So it's not just South America, and it's not just Africa. And there are places in those continents as well where people do not have access to clean drinking water. We here are very fortunate. We, for the moment, do. But we, as custodians of that privilege, that ability, have been very poor. We have gotten better. We do things differently now than we did 50 years ago. But we still have not gone far enough. This program is about as light a touch that I can think the government can do. If we were serious, we would require annual inspections or inspections every 2 or 3 years or whatever that may be of all of the septic systems that we have in this county. We don't do that. This is not government overreach. If anything, it doesn't go far enough. But every journey starts with a first step, and this is the first step. There are bigger polluters. Some of the meetings I've been at, we've been challenged, why don't you go after them? They've mentioned the agricultural industry, they've mentioned other industries, and you are right. We do need to go after them as well. But this is a first step. And if we as a community, because that's what this is about, we as a community are not willing to take even the first step, then we are not willing to take any step. People have talked to me about property rights. I appreciate property rights. I'm a homeowner in this county. I appreciate my home. I try to take care of it. I've lived there for almost 30 years. But property rights has been used as the excuse to prevent the community, society, from moving forward in a progressive and just way throughout the history of this country. It was the argument that allowed some people to claim that they could own other human beings as slaves. It was the argument made by industrialists who said they could employ children for 6 hours a day, or 12 or 14 hours a day, for pennies. It has been the argument that has been used over and over again to stop society from moving forward. I've heard people talk about voluntariness. Voluntariness does not work. If you're going to put together a program which is strictly voluntary, you have no program. At the end of the day, this is a program that is a light touch. It is a program that has worked. It is a program that has bettered, improved the water that we have. It is a program that needs to continue. And I would invite the majority of this board to join me in voting no on this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Augustine.
Thank you. I too have never been accused of being shy. Although I'm not here to give one of my fiery partisan speeches tonight, because really water isn't partisan, and I'm really hopeful that there will be some open-mindedness on the other side of the aisle to this discussion, because this is a serious issue, and it is not. It is. I want to dispel some of the myths that have been shared tonight, but I also have some statements to share as well. I have serious concerns with this repeal. This ordinance has helped maintain clean groundwater throughout the county for the last 10 years. And that's not just according to the health department, that's not just according to me. That's according to the Kalamazoo Watershed Council, which the Kalamazoo Watershed Council makes up about a third of the county. There are other water councils and stewards of water. We heard from Clean Water tonight. We heard from an MSU biologist. These are facts, these are science-based facts that we're talking about. This isn't a political position. The largest township in our county is opposed to this repeal. A third of our population lives in that township. I understand that there's been some people that have had some concerns with the administration of this program. I get that. I've been on both sides. I've sold and bought property in Eaton County. I currently live in the city of Grand Ledge, so I'm connected to municipal water supply. But as one speaker said tonight, my opinion should count less. Well, I think that's far from the truth. See, we all drink the water in this county. I take my family to Fox Park to swim in the water there. And I get some of you are concerned that maybe there's some grandstanding here and that we're talking about worst case scenarios. But these truly could be real life scenarios that we're talking about here. And I think we've come a long way in this county to address some of these potential concerns. Now, the people that I've talked to recently, more of the problem with the program, except for there are some people that benefit from this repeal financially, and I would set those people aside. That not that they mean less, but certainly they have a vested interest in this repeal that's of a financial nature. But there are other people that do have serious concerns in this program, and I understand that. We can fix this program if there are concerns. If there's a problem with how the program is administered, from what I've heard, people are concerned with how the health department administers that. Well, last I checked, the Eaton-Barry Board of Health was in charge of the health department. There are things that board could do to make this program administered better. Because I think that we have seen that there are benefits. I know that the chairman has been supportive of this in the past. And it's actually adverse to his profession. He's a realtor, and I get that realtors typically don't like this. Although I see on this list of people who supported TOST at least one or two realtors that I know that are in support of this ordinance that we have. But we talked about fixing the program, and it was my understanding that we were making steps to fix the program. For some reason, Barry County decided that they were going to go with the approach of repeal it and then maybe we'll fix it, which has been that's been the mantra for too many different serious items in our country and in our state and county. Why don't we fix it instead of just getting rid of it? That's my question. Why are we letting Barry County drive Eaton County? I concur with the thought that maybe Barry County and Eaton County should separate. I know there are a lot of financial constraints to doing that, but I think that we should consider that, because this is not the only issue that Barry and Eaton County have not been in agreement on, and you guys are all aware of that as well. One idea that was discussed, and I think I would like to see the ordinance stay the way that it is, but there has been discussion of, well, let's require the evaluation. Let's not hold up any transfers if there's a failure, as long as it's not directly detrimental to public health. In those specific cases, I think you have to have some mechanism to control that. But we could require the inspections to happen. That way, at least the buyers are aware of the situation that they're getting themselves into. We talk about, I've heard some people say, well, this isn't a third world country. That's true, it's not a third world country, partially because we're not afraid to have regulations that make sense as far as the public health is concerned. As Mr. Brayler said, just because you own property doesn't mean that you have the right to pollute and harm me and my family and you and your family. So why don't we think of things like that, that we could move in that direction and attempt to fix the program as opposed to hurting the people in this county. The idea that we're not a third world country, I think I'm reminded of a time when I was a child. I did grow up in rural Eaton County. I grew up in Vermontville, so I do understand this a little bit. And this story, my sister would kill me if I shared this story, but she's not here, and hopefully she won't see this on the news. But she, when we were children, we were playing in our backyard, and she fell in what I thought was a creek in our backyard. It was the overflow for our septic tank. I mean, I could tell right away that didn't smell like a creek. That's not a third world country. That's right here in Eaton County. That was in Vermontville. Yeah, that was, well, I don't want to give away too much about how old I am, but that was about 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But it still is a concern out there. My parents fixed that system, and it now is functioning. But there's no mechanism to make them make that correction without the TOST sale or without the TOST ordinance. There's also been a lot of discussion about the idea that, and I don't agree with this anyways, but it's just patently false. The idea that banks require you to have these time of sale these time of sale evaluations prior to lending money. First of all, we should not abdicate our responsibility for public health to the banks. I mean, are we really going to trust the banks to keep our public safe? And I'm a banker saying that. And that's where I want to go. So I've been in banking for 15 years. I spent a few years running a mortgage department. The vast majority of loans in this country are purchased by Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae. Somewhere around the neighborhood of 60% when you include Ginnie Mae of mortgages originated are purchased by these government agencies. They do not require these time of sale inspections. Now, there may be some banks that do require them, but I can tell you with pretty much 100% certainty that the majority of banks and loans in this county, those are not requirements of those loans. So again, I'm just trying to dispel some of these myths out there. That just is patently false. See, I just hope that you guys on the other side of the aisle will consider this conversation that we've had tonight. Consider the science behind this. These are not just random people saying that we need this. These are scientists and water experts. This could truly be an issue in our county. Now, do I think that if we repeal this 2 days from now, we're going to have a child die of E. coli or something like that? Probably not. But there is a potential that could happen down the road, and I think we all need to be cognizant of that. So I just urge my colleagues here to consider that. I will be voting in opposition to this, and I hope that you will as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Prowright.
Okay, I'm going to be voting no on repeal. I'll make this short. I was here when we passed it. So, again, I will agree with my other commissioners here who are saying to vote no because I was given example after example after example for a year as we put this process in place. And the reason that it went in place and that it was approved by the board then. It was approved by the health department, Board of Health. I was on Board of Health. So I seen these things that had kids playing in swing sets by failed septic systems. I seen the pipes that were running into our creeks. I went out and I seen the locations myself. So I'm not in favor of repealing this, and I voted for it knowing that I have public sewers in Delta Township, but I am still on a well. So I know that when I pass that and said yes, that at some point I may, of course, want to sell my home, and that I would also have to abide by the policy that was put into place. This is a public health issue. We don't want to have beaches closed. We don't want to have Gun Lake closed. We don't want to have Thornapple River Beach closed, which those places get closed because of it. So it's a public health issue. I have someone where I work, and when I was telling him about repealing this, he remembers when he was 23 years old, not in this county, but he was an avid water skier. He ended up very, very ill for 3 months. Part of the time at U of M. He had hepatitis A at 23 years old. The only thing that a full investigation could come up with was that he had drank enough of that water in that lake that was contaminated to get this hepatitis A. Luckily, he was 23 years old. He was a good, strong person, and he didn't succumb to hepatitis A. And that's where it comes from, is water.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments?
I have a comment. I have a comment.
Commissioner Spence.
Yes, I also am opposed to the repeal of TOST, and I think it's pretty obvious. The chairman of the Health and Human Services Committee, I'm on there too. In her report, she said there was a recommendation out of the committee. It certainly was not a unanimous recommendation. I said, I don't see how this could be partisan, but it ended up being, in my view, a partisan decision with the Democrats from Delta saying, we don't want this regulation to be repealed, and people from the other part of the county, for whatever reason, had decided that they did. And I have a few comments that I want to make generally about this issue and some of the things that have been said today. Commissioner Baylor talks about property right regulation. Somebody from the audience talks about it. I don't care what you do on your property until it affects me. If you want to crap on your ground, if you want to piss on your ground, go ahead and do it. But then I suddenly realize I'm downriver from you in terms of the aquifer. And people say, if you don't believe in science, people say, oh, it's only a little bit. Well, you don't drink it, do you? You send it down the aquifer for somebody to drink. Some of my colleagues who have voted in support of this at the committee level, I look in amazement. Some of them have young kids. And I sit there and I say, you know, my kids are long since grown. I ask, how can you support something and then look at your kids and say, I hope that you're not the one that catches one of these diseases? You know, it just doesn't make sense. Why are you trying to repeal it? People have talked about the Barry-Eaton County. Barry County wants to repeal it. Well, I'm not going to be on this board next year because I'm not running for re-election, but I live in this county. My position has been clear. I stated this last year. Barry County doesn't regard public health the way we do. They complain about we pay too much for public health. They don't value it. So I support what I've heard from the audience, what I've heard from a couple of my colleagues by innuendo. If the culture doesn't match, tell Barry County to go to hell. You know, and so people start saying, oh, you're making this into a big deal. Those same people said the same thing about Flint when they poisoned 4,000 kids from lead. And it didn't become a problem until they suddenly realized that some of the things they were doing, and they did it in terms of how they relaxed regulations and so forth, resulted in Legionnaire's disease, which is not a lead problem. At least 4 people have died in Flint from water-borne antigens and diseases caused by government neglect. In terms of your property, if you don't want to have anybody coming on there, I assume you also don't want anybody to come on your property and inspect your electrical system. If you own a commercial business, I assume you don't want anybody to come on there and check for either lead or asbestos. I can't build a wall between people who want their property to be as dangerous as they want it to be. If you drink it, if you die, if your kids get sick, I look at that and I have empathy. But when it starts coming downriver toward me in Delta, then we have a problem. The people in Delta have a problem. And what is the benefit? People talk about the cost. If your property isn't polluting, it's just the cost of a regular inspection, right? If your property is polluting, does that mean we should ignore it? This TOST regulation is designed to fine polluting properties. So most people don't pay anything beyond a regular inspection fee. So I don't know. I don't want to get emotional about this because my vote isn't going to change. But we're all political animals. And when I'm not running for election again, but when you look at your constituents and say, I don't care what's in the water, that is a pretty good issue for me to say, they don't care what's in the water. Thank you.
Commissioner Wood?
I would like to object to the notion that we don't care what's in the water. Rescinding the resolution is not saying we're against clean water. It's saying we're against the ordinance and the mandate. It's not saying we're against, even inspections of water. I think there was a few of us who did try to say, let's try to work this out. Let's try to see what we can do rather than just completely abolish the program. That didn't work out, unfortunately, and what ended up happening is we ended up having to go back to the drawing board and essentially clear the slate with the notion that, we'll repeal this regulation, this mandate, but not, I'm pretty sure none of us here are against clean water. And we're certainly not, well, that just is plain and simple. It's not that, I'm not going to say, I'm against clean water, even if I don't agree with this program. That's a falsehood. So, and I'm pretty sure most of us would feel the same way.
Commissioner DeRosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Commissioner Braley when he says we're all affected. I appreciate what he had to say. However, I disagree with you when you mentioned voluntary systems, and I would refer you to the Michigan Agricultural Environmental Assurance Program, which is voluntary. It's well participated. They do water testing on several levels. And it's to guarantee that your food and your milk and other things, agricultural products, are clean. So it's all voluntary. There's no mandate in that. There's no fines, no fees, no penalties for that. Commissioner Spence, I heard you mention, I don't know how many times now, Flint water. Please bear in mind that Flint water had nothing to do with sewage. It had to do with an infrastructure, a water supply infrastructure that was neglected by a city government for 30 years. And then when they went to reuse it, there was lead in there and tin and all kinds of metals in there, and that caused the problem. And I have not yet seen any verification to Legionnaire's disease. But what does flow downriver, following your comment, I'd like to bring to your attention that in the city of Lansing in 2016, there were 50 sewage discharge events resulting in 346 million gallons of sewage being dumped into our waterways. And that flows past Eaton County. That is going downhill. That is almost 1 million gallons per day on average, which is equal to 228,000 private home septic systems, which in Eaton County alone, we have barely 47,000. So to blame bad water and disease on private homes is ludicrous. Granted, there may be some failed systems out there, but TOST did not give us any standards for failed systems, save for a broken tile, a cracked septic tank, or a lid that caved in. There was no good testing for the drain field itself. I've heard some people mention that we had nothing prior to TOST, and I'd like to mention that we have the sanitary code that I think was mandated in 1968, as near as I can tell, and this most recent one was adopted in 2000. And in that
sanitary code, section 4 enforcement says all premises affected by this code shall be subject to inspection by the health officer, and the health officer may collect such samples for laboratory examination as he deems necessary for the enforcement of this code. Now, given that we've got roughly 20,000 private homes or private septic systems in Eaton County alone, and according to my sources, roughly between 1,000 and 1,400 are on sale at any given point. That would tell me that we have a tenth maybe that we can test when we have verbiage in our sanitation code that says our official can go out and test for a sample. It's not that we were lacking in enforcement, not that we were lacking in testing. So to say that TOST was the end-all and be-all, I think is ridiculous. What it did do, though, was target those 20,000 homeowners in Eaton County and those in Barry County. I don't have that number. This said at the time of sale or transfer, we have to come in and test your system, and if we do find a problem, you don't get so much of a chance to fix it as a time frame that you can go out and save money and do this. It's got to be done within 180 days. And in those testing, there were many exemptions, and they're spelled out in the TOST regulation. And the reason that I was against it, and still against it, and will vote to uphold this rescind resolution, is because I think there's better ways to apply this testing to Eaton County in particular, and in our state. So, I understand. I talked to one of the other commissioners, I've talked to several now, and I said, I don't understand why this is partisan. I think this is common sense. Let's apply this equally across our county. Certainly, obviously, through the information I just told you about City of Lansing, this is not pinpointed to private systems. This is shared through municipalities, and municipalities certainly do far more damage than the individual. Thank you.
Commissioner Whitaker?
Well, I don't know about all the rest of you, but this is wearing me out. I am toasted up to here, and I don't know how we could have messed up a good intention any worse than we have. I've been on the Board of Health for 6 years, and TOST has been on the agenda and brought forth to us from constituents and residents every single meeting for 6 years. I think the public health is, the health department is in charge of public health. Public health is largely preventing illnesses in a proactive way. And so that was the intent when originally this started. And it's just been a list after list of unintended consequences. So I accept that and I understand that, and I think it's not good to have people hating the government and thinking that we're trying to pull the wool over people's eyes or screw them over or take their rights away. We're supposed to be helping each other. So though I'm not in favor of repealing this without having some other alternative when so many people, especially in my constituents, really care about this. But I feel like if I don't know how we could have messed this process up any worse. I just don't think we've been, and I'm not pointing at any one person or any one board. I've been the chair of that Board of Health, so I'm not denying my own part of this. But I think that we have to learn from this process. We have to learn how we have screwed up as leaders in our community about important issues. And things that are life-threatening. This isn't important stuff. And so my recommendation, and I know this is a different issue, but I think we need to come up with a process as our board, as a board of a community board, of how we address and how we approach these kinds of decisions, and how do we get some shared facts, and how do we get a shared information base before we move forward on things. Or I think we just need to be more deliberate. And we can't go back and fix all the layer upon layer upon layer of things that have gone awry with TOST. But I really hope that we can learn from the process, especially looking at some of the other issues we have coming forth in our county that might be really volatile like this too. So I'm going to vote no to repeal this because I feel strongly that it's important that we do something in our county, and that the amount of change, the amount of good that the program has done shouldn't just get erased without something to replace it. That's realistic for the health department to actually be able to do.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Augustine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I spoke. I just have a couple of questions. One is a technical question. If the repeal were to take place, my understanding is that it would be effective 45 days from today. Is that correct?
Correct.
What happens with those that have escrowed funds to repair septic, well and septic systems throughout the counties?
Well, in those situations, I can't speak. Every situation is different, but in those particular instances, more than likely, there is a problem that needs to be fixed. The funds aren't escrowed.
Well, yeah, that's what this ordinance is about.
Well, and
that's what I'm talking about.
We're still going to fix septic systems in the county.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, that's.
No, and this is a serious question. If somebody, because one alternative to fixing it prior to the sale and allowing the transfer is to escrow 1.5 times the cost of the repair.
Correct.
And at that time, that's a discussion between the buyer and the seller. I know there's been a lot of people that have said, well, the sellers have to bear all this cost. That's totally false. It's a negotiation, just like every other part of a real estate transaction is a negotiation. So if this is repealed, then is the findings of the health board are they no longer valid at that point, and now those monies are to be dispersed back to those that put them in, or do they still have to fix the problem that was addressed at that time?
That'll be an issue the health board will have to delve into.
Well, we're voting to repeal it tonight. Shouldn't we know what the ramifications of this repeal are from a technical standpoint?
That'll be I would say that the onus will be on the health department, on their board, to figure out those particular instances, what the solution would be.
Would it be, out of the question to delay this vote until we have a response from the health board to those types of questions?
What you're asking are hypotheticals.
They're not. They're actual cases.
There may be, yes. And there's a board set up that would have to intervene in some way or other. That's the health board.
Are we opposed to getting the information before we vote? I get where we have differences of opinion, but what's the hurry?
This is purely my opinion,
yeah.
Not based on fact. I know we have the health officer in the audience, so I don't know if she's able to answer that. But in my world of insurance, everything's about effective dates. And so I guess my understanding of what's happening is, from assuming if it is repealed, then 45, anything in the works, if you will, prior to that, I would assume needs to be seen through under the current TOST provision. That's my educated guess. And that's all I want to make it clear, that it is an educated guess.
Well, and I appreciate your comment. I think we should
everything in these types of situations is based on effective dates, and in this case, a closing date. So,
but don't you think it would be appropriate for us to make a decision based on facts instead of educated guesses, Brian?
I don't disagree with that at all. I feel.
I'm being totally sincere here. What is the rush to do this tonight?
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Chairman. I've heard this referred to as an ordinance, and I've heard this referred to as a resolution. And am I clear that this was entered in as a joint resolution from the two counties, and it is indeed not an ordinance?
It is a regulation adopted under the Public Health Code. It is not a county ordinance.
Thank you.
It was a regulation adopted by the Board of Health and then approved by resolution by both county boards of commissioners.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Are you ready for a vote?
I request a roll call vote, Mr. Chair.
I'd like to move to table.
Oh. You have to take a vote on what's on the floor.
I second.
Okay, and move to table by Commissioner Augustine, seconded by Commissioner Spence. All those in favor of tabling?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Roll call, please.
It's a roll call to table.
Commissioner Barnes.
No.
Commissioner Augustine.
Yes.
Commissioner Spence.
Yes.
Commissioner Pearl-Wright.
Yes.
Commissioner Whitaker.
No.
Commissioner Freeman.
Yes.
Commissioner Brayler,
Yes.
Commissioner Grosha,
No.
Commissioner Eaton,
No.
Commissioner Ridge,
No.
Commissioner Lotzenheiser,
No.
Commissioner Austin,
No.
Commissioner Wood,
No.
Commissioner Rogers,
No.
Chairman Mulder.
No. Okay. Roll call on the resolution. Voting for it is to repeal the regulation. Roll call. Yes, the affirmative is to repeal, and the negative is to not repeal. Just to be clear.
Commissioner Barnes,
Yes.
Commissioner Augustine,
No.
Commissioner Spence,
No.
Commissioner Pearl-Wright,
No.
Commissioner Whitaker,
No.
Commissioner Freeman,
No.
Commissioner Brayler,
No.
Commissioner Grosha,
Yes.
Commissioner Eaton,
Yes.
Commissioner Ridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Lotzenheiser,
Yes.
Commissioner Austin,
Yes.
Commissioner Wood,
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers,
Yes.
Chairman Mulder.
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, Commissioner Rogers, you were in the middle of a presentation. You're next.
Commissioner Mulder. Yes, we have one more resolution that Health and Human Services acted on, and it's a resolution declaring April the 3rd, 2018 as National Service Recognition Day, and I move that resolution.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Rogers, supported by Commissioner Whitaker. April 3rd, National Recognition Service Day. Comments, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
And that completes my report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Public safety. Commissioner Austin, do you want to carry this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank Commissioner Ridge, our public safety last month, chair on that. I'm going to be real quick on this. Last month, the sheriff updated us on the involved shooting that took place last November, and the officer was cleared of all criminal charges by the Eaton County prosecutor and the investigation. We will be looking at some tower leases through 911. Our 911 director is here if we have any questions. They did discuss Senate Bill 400, the next gen 911. That process is going forward as scheduled. And we do have a couple resolutions, actually 5 resolutions I would like to get to if we could. If I could, I'd move on page 40, and I believe page 61 are 2 projects, central dispatch tower sites. One is in Olivet, and the other one is on a property owner of Reinhardt Cook. If there's any question, I think Mike Armitage can answer these. But in order to ensure an adequate radio coverage for emergency service dispatching throughout the county, Central Dispatch has identified the need to place radio equipment on towers and other infrastructures owned by the municipalities or the individuals. So I would move these 2 resolutions.
Support. The 2 lease agreements by resolution for 2 tower sites, moved by Commissioner Austin, supported by Commissioner Augustine. Questions or comments about, we're voting on these, the 2 of them, 1 and 2. Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
On page 82, we have a resolution to adjust the Eaton County 911 surcharge. Whereas this includes the county of 911 surcharge, the state 911 surcharge, and the monthly prepaid surcharge. Whereas the Eaton County Board of Commissioners hereby determines that the Eaton County monthly 911 surcharge shall be adjusted from $0 to $1.75 devices effective July 1st. And I would move this resolution.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Austin, supported by Commissioner Rogers, for $1.75 surcharge effective July the 1st, 2018. Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay. Opposed by? Raise your hand if you oppose, so we can put it in the record. 3, 4. Okay, thank you.
Page 83, National Public Safety Telecommunications. If Mike, you real quickly want to explain this?
Telecommunicators Week.
Well, out of all the items, this wasn't the one I thought I'd actually explain. I appreciate you considering all the resolutions on tonight. This one particularly, every year as a national effort, there is the national effort put forward to recognize 911 dispatchers as they are the first responders. This week was designated by Congress the April 8th through the 14th. It's the second full week of April every year, or the first full week of April every year. And again, it's just a time set aside to recognize our 911 dispatchers. A lot of times their work goes unseen when they're answering the calls. They're doing CPR instruction and other life-saving instruction on the phone until first responders can arrive. So this is a way to recognize their efforts.
Thank you, Michael. And you are having an open house pretty soon?
We're going to have an elected official open house coming up on April 13th. We're also going to have a public open house later in the year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Motion on the floor to recognize April the 8th through 14th as National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. Moved by Commissioner Austin, supported by support? Yeah, there it is. Commissioner Ridge. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
I would like to remind Commissioner Eaton that April 13th is Ways and Means, so we can hurry up that meeting so we can get to the open house. The last resolution I would like to introduce is National Crime Victims Week resolution, and the motto is expand the circle, reach all victims, and I would move this resolution.
Support. Moved by Commissioner Austin, supported by Commissioner Pearl Wright for Crime Victims Week. Questions or comments? I would appreciate that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
And that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
You know, Crime Victims Week reminds me of what you're doing with Families Against Narcotics. We have a group that meets here regularly, and it's really supportive. It's the parents of people and families that have had narcotics problems and deaths, and you know, it's great to see the community coming together. And I even consider the young people that have died from narcotics and opioids as being victims. It's a sad situation, and I appreciate your working with that group.
And if I could add real quick, that's the first Thursday of every month, and that truly affects everybody. The families, grandparents. You forget about the grandkids, and the siblings, but I would encourage everybody to attend one meeting, and you will see how it affects the community. So I appreciate the board's vote last month on pursuing that lawsuit as well. So thank you.
Okay, Information Technology, Commissioner Ridge.
Thank you, Chairman Mulder. IT Department met Thursday, March 1st. It was reported by the IT Department that they had created an incident response plan in response to the lien audit they had. Instead of an actual security procedures for that. I have one action item. A resolution recognizing April 2018 as National County Government Month, regarding the nation's 3,069 counties and more than 300 million Americans who provide essential services to us. Now therefore be it resolved that the Eaton County Board of Commissioners do hereby proclaim April 2018 as National County Government Month and encourage all county officials, employees, schools to participate in county government celebration activities. So I move that.
Support. Moved by Commissioner Ridge, supported by Commissioner Whitaker, to have April 2018 as National County. Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Public Works and Planning, Commissioner Lawson.
Thank you, Commissioner. We had a lengthy meeting, as we have recently. On page 86, you'll find our only action item. It is for the DNR Land and Water Grant that we held the public forum for before our general meeting here. And just, I guess, a quick explanation of why it was expedited so is obviously Mr. Stoll just being hired, and we weren't in capacity with the Parks Director to move it forward. I do want to thank Jackie as she kept us moving behind the scenes. And now that we are at the point with April 1st being the deadline, we do need to move on this now. So, and again, this is the handout that you all received with the financials on it in regard to applying for the DNR Land and Water Grant, and I move this.
Support.
I would note, Commissioner, that due to the change that Mr. Stowell mentioned during the public hearing, that the total grant request referred to, total project request referred to in the resolution is incorrect and should be amended to reflect the $224,500, I believe. So I apologize that as we completed that this afternoon, I did not notice that change. The resolution references 220,000.
So it should be 214, 440.
214,500.
Okay.
So I will make that note if
I'll support.
Still good?
Yeah, I'm still good, buddy.
Okay,
I guess I will.
Is amended.
That does not affect our county's contribution, projected contribution. There we go.
The resolution as amended, supported by Commissioner Augustine, moved by Commissioner Lawson. Is there questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
And I guess I would just briefly add, because it was brought up in public comment, Blair was there doing a semi-annual road report. That sector was discussed at length. So I assure you, sir, it is being worked on and discussed at this level. We all hope for, obviously, for the best situation, but it is being discussed. So
Canal Road, you mean?
Yes. And also, as many people are aware, the actions going on at the Planning Committee as far as the solar was also discussed at length, but obviously it is not to our table, so we leave it at that. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ways and Means, Commissioner Austin, or Commissioner Eaton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 87, you're going to find the first item on my list, which will be the claims audited by Ways and Means. I move that we pay the bills.
Support. Moved by Commissioner Eaton, supported by Commissioner Rogers. Pay the bills. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
All right, on page 90, you're going to find a resolution put together by our controller, thankfully. During our Ways and Means meeting, the resolution was presented to us by Oakland, I believe, Oakland County, who also opposed the budget office's proposed amendments to the Indigent Defense Act. And that's essentially, we've cleaned it up with this resolution, and as presented, obviously we are currently complying with the act as they originally put it out there. Now they're proposing changing the funding structure, if you will, so that the county ends up paying more. So that's what we're opposing, and that's why this resolution is forward. So I move the resolution.
Support. Moved by Commissioner Eaton, supported by Commissioner Augustine. The resolution opposing the amendments to the Indigent Defense Act. And I think we all understand that the act itself we've been working on it, we've been plodding along, having committee meetings, working on it, and suddenly the rules are changing, the goals are changing, everything's changing in the middle of this, and it's nonsensical. So we're opposed to as much of the process as anything else. So. Comments?
I would just indicate that under the current legislation, the county's local share is approximately $450,000. Under the state budget office's proposal, it would be approximately $730,000 to $740,000. So the cost of the local share would increase. As indicated in the resolution, the county remains fully committed to complying with the provisions of the Act as they are currently enacted. And by way of update, the county's compliance plan is under consideration, will be considered in the Defense Commission meeting on Monday. We'll report the status of that next month.
Okay. Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a reminder to all the commissioners, this is budget season. We started the process in the minutes of the Ways and Means. You'll find the initial information provided by our controller. Please make sure you stay current with what we are given so that you have an opportunity. By the way, a reminder, you are all invited to Ways and Means during the budgeting process, so please stay current as we do the budgeting. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now it's time for the, as promised, the second limited public comment. Please state your name and address.
Margot Eseltine, 8888 South Cochran, Olivet. During the course of the heated debate tonight, the serious debate, something was said that was highly inappropriate, and I would like to think that the person who made the comment upon reflection would not do so again. And I would also believe that other commissioners did not correct the situation at the time because you were focused on a very serious discussion. But perhaps during commissioner's comment, you might have intended to bring this up. I would, on behalf of many people in Eaton County, I would like to apologize to our neighbors in Barry County for the remark about their intended eternal destiny. That is not what we would wish for you. I value our neighbors in Eaton County, and telling them to go to hell is just inappropriate. So I do apologize, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
I'm Matthew Shepard from Shiawassee County. I'm the second vice chairman of the U.S. Taxpayers Party of Michigan, and I appreciate, whereas you've brought forward resolutions to vote upon constitutionally, remarks have been made that muddy different sides or whatever of the action, but a constitutional vote was brought up, and I do applaud you for bringing these to attention. I'm here on the premise to encourage people to support a part-time legislature. We've been working on this for about 10 years now, and we've got plenty of signatures, but we need the support to continue on and bring it to the ballot for the people who vote. Like I said, from Shiawassee County, my opinion probably doesn't matter much here on what your resolutions cover, but many dogs and cats pee on your lawns on an annual basis. So if one person pees on their lawn out on the farm back behind a tree, that's not going to make much difference about the quality of water that goes downstream. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And for commissioner comments. Commissioner Lawson.
As many know, I've been very critical of the TOST situation. I guess I'll just speak very briefly that I look forward to seeing what the health board is going to be coming, and I expect it. This was a if we're promised the solution, let's see it. So that's what I want.
Commissioner Whitaker?
Just to clarify, no one promised you a solution.
Tonight was the solution.
Well, no, I mean, nobody on our board has promised that we come up with a solution. The health department.
Oh, I see what you're clarifying.
Yeah, I mean, there's some people from Barry County are very adamant about that too, but we don't have a plan, and we also may not have the resources. We're going to be probably cutting staff, and we're going to be cutting revenue and expenses. So
I'm fully aware of what's just.
So there may or may not be an alternative anytime soon.
Commissioner Pearlwright.
Okay, you did notice in your packet the Delta Township Board sent a notice that they supported TOST. So in talking with the board members, there may come a time that Delta will have their own solution, because as you can see, there are 12 counties that had some type of program, but also several townships. So I understand that the Board of Health is under no responsibility to create a new program. So I would think that I'm from Delta Township and I'm working with them because I do believe in it that much.
Thank you. Commissioner Spence.
Yes, I would just say that anybody who expects me to apologize for saying somebody should go to hell can go to hell.
That's inappropriate. You should apologize to the people of Eaton County, because that kind of language does not belong.
Okay, enough. We're good.
Yes, be quiet.
Okay, anyone else?
We have no old business, unfinished business, or new business. We'll adjourn until Wednesday, April the 18th.
That's class, baby.